The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hello and welcome to the new episode of Mindfulness in Action. My name is Dalida Turkovic, and here is the new episode with a guest that I already mentioned in one of my previous episodes where I talked about the book Discovering Body's Wisdom. And I just reached out to Mirka Knaster and said, look, this book I've been carrying with me all around Asia, and then coming back to Europe. I gave a lot of my books away, but that one I kept. And I wish to interview her and to hear her perspective on what practices really help us to connect with the body. And then I began to research a little bit more and realized that Mirka wrote many more books, which I didn't read, but some of them really attracted my attention, and one was particularly on the right speech. And then I asked her if she was willing to add that element to the episode, and she agreed. And then in one of the episodes, I also mentioned my relationship with my father, who in the meantime passed and transitioned. We just had a funeral a couple of days ago, and Mirka was aware of that. And while we were waiting in the studio, I realized that her kind and gentle voice actually touched some wound I was expecting to come into the episode, and actually put that on the side and be very professional. But it opened up a presence of humanity. So we don't know where the episode is going to go exactly, but in a moment I'm going to let Mirka into the studio. Before that, just a little bit about her. I'm going to read that she was born in Europe and educated in America, and through living and traveling in diverse areas of the world and studying the traditions of different peoples, she brings a cross-cultural perspective to her research on women, the body, healing, and spiritual practice. So, Mirka, I give you a warm welcome into the studio together with me. And thank you for agreeing to have this interview.
No, thank you for inviting me, and especially at a challenging time. I didn't know whether we would actually wind up having a conversation.
Well, as it happened, we were supposed to meet last week, and then it is so strange how it all happened. The miscommunication, my one message giving you wrong time. We were here in the studio waiting for you. You were waiting for a different time. And then as we were going through all of that, just 2 days later, my father passed. And I just trust that somehow things happen for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe another option was that I would be alone in the studio today talking about something, and I don't think I would actually be strong for that. So thank you for being here. For me, actually, I thought in whichever way. I would like to share my interest in your book, which you wrote a while ago, Discovering Body's Wisdom. The reason why I got it is that I actually do have a difficulty connecting with my body. I tend to disassociate really easily. And then I was practicing a lot of martial arts, but now reflecting back, I still believe that I was all the time disconnected from my body. I was doing the practices automatically, and even reflecting back on my meditation now recently, as I'm more getting into the practice, whichever I'm realizing I'm also, even I know all of these concepts and I'm not in my body. And then what your book provided for me was actually the insight that there are so many different ways to come into the body. So could you share a little bit about that to begin with, and how your journey into the practice actually began?
Well, for me, I was very much in my head as well as an academician. And I realized that something was amiss. And that's when I became involved in various practices in the alternative healthcare field. And that helped me to get more in touch with my body and not just operating from my mind. It's not that I wasn't feeling my body. It was just that there were things I didn't understand or necessarily, I would override messages from my body because I wanted to finish my research. I wanted to, I would just forget. The hours would go by, the building would be closed, and I'd still be in my office working on my project until a phone call came, and I realized, oh my goodness, I forgot to go home for dinner. That's that kind of disconnection. But that doesn't happen anymore. I'm much too aware of sensations. And I think a very big factor was my first Vipassana retreat. I tried, for example, to do Zen, and it just I didn't connect with Zen. But my first Vipassana retreat in India, this was in 1981, the whole focus, there are different ways to do Vipassana. I mean, there are different entry points. The Buddha talked about them. But one of them is focusing on bodily sensations. And you wind up going from your head to your toes, back up again. Excuse me. And I became so attuned to every sensation. I began walking around even after the retreat, noticing everything. And that was a really big entry point. And I also realized how useful that was, not just in terms of Dharma practice, but in terms of my health. Because when you notice those tiny sensations, you have the opportunity for many things. One of them, I think I should not hold that position longer because I could be overstraining something. Or you feel a sensation, or you just notice how your body feels, and you think, I'm just on the verge of catching something. What can I do to boost my immune system and not get sick? And another way is, if you notice, let's say you're in conversation with someone and you notice heat arising in the body because of anger, you then have the opportunity to decide, are you going to burst out with your anger, or are you going to step back? And so the body is giving off all these signals all the time. We think about spiritual practice as something ethereal, But there's no spiritual practice unless you're in your body. That's life. You can't have a spiritual practice without life, and your life exists in this body, in this lifetime. So those are some of the ways. And over time, I began to realize that certain ways that I functioned, when I looked back over my life, I realized how much of that was kinesthetically based. In other words, I remember when I was at university and I would take copious notes. Other students could just hear and remember, but that's not the kind of learner I am. I need to have my body involved, so by writing and visually. Later, I would remember, oh, that was in the upper left-hand corner of the left side page of, and I didn't know it at the time. This was before I got involved in alternative healthcare practices, before I got involved in Vipassana practice. But I looked back over my life and realized I was already operating in that way, but I wasn't aware of what to call it. I didn't know what it was. And so I happen to be a visual and kinesthetic learner. Other people do it other ways. And I think I give an example in the book. I remember one woman I interviewed. She talked about different learning modalities or entry points. And she talked about one child who couldn't seem to learn her mathematics, her times table in class. But when she was outside and doing flips and moving around, she could go through the whole multiplication table. She needed to move in order for that information to come forward. So really, in a lot of ways, discovering the body's wisdom is about discovering how we function best, how we learn best. And it's different for everyone. Unfortunately, in most countries, the educational system does not address this. Because I know in Europe and America, originally, there was a Prussian system of education, and that was by rote, because people were being trained to be good workers in the industrial system. And so some kids wound up being called stupid because they couldn't follow that particular educational system. And it turns out we all learn differently. So
yeah, and in your book, you mention so many different practices from different traditions, but not only spirituality. I mean, there is a massage, there's also movement, there is sitting practice, standing practice, Reiki, energetic work as well. And it's really amazing. And for me, I actually, in that episode, I was just going through the list and saying, this, I don't have a clue what it is. And this one, I actually tried, and so on. So I believe the purpose is not to try all these techniques, right? But to actually know what is out there and to connect with the body.
Well,
Is that the message?
I included so many, and there are probably many more now since I wrote the book, because again, different things appeal to different people. So let's say you're not someone who likes to be touched. So you're not going to go for a massage. But maybe being engaged in movement art that works for you. Or if you don't want to be touched, physically touched, maybe working with somebody who does energetic work, and doesn't have to touch your skin, but touches the energy field around your body. So that's something entirely different. So there are all these different practices, not only to appeal to different people, but they can help you at different points in your life. So maybe initially you don't want to be touched, but you get to a point where you do want to be touched, and then you try something different. Or let's say you have sports injuries. Well, there are certain practices that are going to help you more than other practices. So I give this range, Eastern and Western, all the different ways to connect with the body and the health and the wisdom, because, there's an expression, different strokes for different folks. I don't know if you've ever heard it. That's what it is. And not just different strokes for different folks, but at different times. I tried different practices. I trained in different practices at different points. And now there are some things that I want to engage in and other things I'm not interested in. So
Yeah, you mentioned a bit about rote learning and education system, and which is changing so much. And this is actually where I also get curious about the presence of mind when we are connecting with the body, because there's that invitation actually to connect with the body, pause, discern what's going on, and then make a choice, right? Intellectually still, right? Or whichever part we are using. And then I think being educated in former Yugoslavia, in Eastern Europe, rote learning was definitely part of my education, and probably generations after are doing less and less of that. And now with education having AI, there is also this embodiment, and it's like whole other other kind of like game going on. How do we come to it? For example, right now, what is happening? I have only a fan. It's this heat wave in Europe, right? I have only a fan, and I can't have it on because of the sound of the studio. And I'm aware that there's this like drips of sweat coming down my face, also along my spine. It's definitely distracting me. It's taking my attention away. Then I'm aware that there's a knot in my stomach, and maybe a bit of like my palms are astonishingly dry, very dry. Like I wish they were a bit more clammy, actually. And then there's this pressure to perform, to hold the space, to ask the right question. I feel like you are such a resource, and I have so many. There's also this excited little girl who wants to ask so many questions at the same time, and then thinking about the audience as well. And then my cat is coming, and I can see in the corner, and I'm thinking, is the cat going to jump on the computer? All of that is going on right now in my inner and outer space.
It shows me how aware you are, which is amazing. Most people don't have that kind of awareness. And so on the one hand, you may be feeling overwhelmed by noticing all of these things. On the other hand, you're conscious. Think about how many people are walking through life unconsciously. And it's the unconscious behavior that leads to problems. People hurting each other, people speaking ill of each other. So it may feel overwhelming in the moment, but thank goodness you're conscious. I mean, this may sound, it's just, I don't think most people are even aware of how unconscious they are.
So
Look at the way the world is.
Yes,
Look at the condition the
absolutely.
world is in.
I mean, this is why this practice is so dear to my heart. And I'm at the same time thinking of someone listening to this episode and potentially not quite knowing about certain things. So, I mean, not to say that I know more, but I want to come with beginner's mind, because I find myself getting into places where I get lost, and I'm like, I know it, and then I get too much in my mind of knowing it, and then I need to let go of it, and then think like, okay, I think I need to ask really basic questions again, because I got lost a little bit, and it becomes complex and complicated, and I'm thinking, okay, right now, if I'm having this pressure to perform, because one of my passions is to bring this to leaders, and to because I feel leaders have most impact. If I touch one person, and if one person hears this, but they actually lead hundreds, then there is some impact in that. And so a lot of people ask me as well, it's like, so the pressure to perform versus awareness of the difficulty. And then, of course, I know in Vipassana, it's all about extending the capacity to hold awareness when it's difficult. And that's the training. But how do we know that we found the right speech out of that? This is because sometimes, even if I am aware, even if I know everything that is happening inside, you're holding the space right now for me so I can share. And I share what I'm experiencing, and you have understanding, you have soft voice, and I'm feeling, oh, it's okay, I can relax. But then it's not that every day I can find people who can be there for me when I'm experiencing these difficulties. And especially when it comes in my father's passing and pain of loss, this is just the whole mess that comes with how people are not able to hold the space. So what's the connecting point between awareness of the body and the right speech?
Well, there are several ways to think about this. It's important to notice what's going on in the body. You know, is there trembling? Is there heat? Is there cold? And what is that condition telling you? You know, to just find out what is, you know, is that heat anger? Is the cold fear? I don't know. I mean, for everybody, we all have our own body vocabulary. And if I'm trembling, is it fear, or is it because I'm simply cold right now? You know, we each need to learn to discern what the messages are in our body. And this takes time. It's a lifetime of learning. I interviewed many teachers in different traditions, and I went in thinking they've got it. They always get right speech. And I want to talk about another way of thinking about right speech. But what I learned from my interviews with them, they were all so humble. These were people who had been teachers for decades. One of them was a lama. And they all talked about how every day engaging in the most appropriate speech was a challenge. This is not like you arrive at this point and you're done. You always say the right thing at the right time in the right tone of voice to the right person. This is life. We're always practicing. I wrote a whole dissertation about this for my PhD. And here I am. I'm dealing with this all the time. I'm married. I have a husband, and do I always say the right thing at the right time? I don't. And speaking with these teachers made me feel, how shall I put it? Yeah, it's okay to be a human being. You know, the expression to err is human. You know, we're going to make mistakes. There's just no doubt about that. None of us is perfect. So we learn through body awareness. We learn, does this feel like the right time? But the Buddha had certain questions. Is this necessary? Is it the right time? Will it be received? Is it kind? I mean, there are all these questions you can ask yourself before you blurt out. Unfortunately, I don't always ask myself those questions. Sometimes I do blurt out. And I used to be really hard on myself because I wasn't perfect. And now I just accept the fact that, yep, I'm going to blow it sometimes. It's just the way it is. So I have learned a lot from other people and from texts, ancient teachings that I have read. Some of these texts are 2,000 years old, whatever, So the issues that we are dealing with today, in some regards, setting aside technology, are the same issues that people were dealing with 2,500 years ago. Because human beings are human beings. Anyway, there's no magic formula. Just like there isn't a magic bullet in healthcare, there's no magic formula in spiritual practice. But there was something I wanted to get back to and that I learned from speaking with all these teachers, and that is, instead of the term right speech, I came up with respectful communication. In other words, when we're speaking with someone, are we respecting the integrity of this other human being, or are we placing ourselves above that person? And if we respect them, we're also respecting ourselves, and vice versa. Because if we're being nasty, in a way, we're not respecting ourselves. We're not respecting our own goodness that is there. We just need to let it out. So the most appropriate word or words that we can offer somebody else in the moment, we hope will be the most appropriate words. There's no guarantee. You know, the Buddha talked about we don't have control over the outcome of our wholesome speech or wholesome behavior. What needs to be there for our own spiritual well-being is to have a wholesome intention, right? So we may have a wholesome intention in communicating with someone, but there's no guarantee that it's going to land in the right place. We can't control how other people respond or react. We hope they'll respond, but often people react because we sometimes react too.
Could you share a little bit more about wholesome intention?
So, examining where we're coming from before we do something or we say something. Is this for our own aggrandizement? Is this because we truly want to support someone? Is this because we're trying to look good? You know, image. Is our intention to get back at someone? You know, revenge. So if your intention is wholesome, then you remain clean. And if not, maybe the other person is picking up on that. And then you wonder, why are they reacting like that? Well, look back inside and ask, what was your intention? So again, this is like we have to always check in with ourselves. And, you know, that's not to say that we always know. I mean, now that I'm older, I look back and I think, I just didn't know then. I wasn't clear on where I was coming from. I didn't have certain awarenesses yet. I wasn't in touch with what was driving me. You know, maybe, you know, we all have things to deal with from childhood. And hopefully at certain points in our lives, we come to some kind of understanding and maybe acceptance of things that happened. And those things are not behind our actions. You know, we recognize, oh, no, I'm not in that situation anymore. I don't have to react like this. But, you know, this all takes, not everyone is really interested in that path, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we just have to accept, well, 20 years ago, I didn't know XYZ, and I said things and I did things that maybe I regret, but I didn't have enough knowledge to do any differently at that point.
There was, as I'm listening, there's a situation that happened just 2 days before my father's passing. Him and I had some, let's say, some differences in opinion. And somehow after coming back home, I tried to express myself and find finally my strength to stand in front of this military, very strict guy that I Anyway, so 2 years ago, or a year, a year ago, I really tried to stand up for myself, and I thought that was my message. I owe that to myself, and I didn't use the right speech to explain to him how much I was hurt. Explain, and that caused, of course, he was very quiet, already weak, and he just left. Anyway, in the hospital, we managed to rekindle the relationship, and maybe some 5-6 months later, it started to heal, and it was really beautiful what was happening in this last 8 months. And but in the hospital, he was, as after he had the stroke. For some reason, I was the only person who could understand him. His speech was really not recognizable, and then he started to talk to my mom, even if I was there, talking about me in the third person, saying how one thing he regrets and he will never be able to forgive her, was that I behaved that way last year. And then my mom and my sister started to defend me, and they were like, but no, you already talked about it, it's healed on. And I said, no, hold on, wait. Who do you want to talk? Who is the person that you are referring to? And he said, well, Dalida. And I said, well, who am I? And he said, well, you're Dalida. And I'm like, so can you talk to me? And he said, I'm really disappointed, and I will never be able to forgive you. And I said, so what does that mean? Where do we go from here? If you're never able to forgive me, where do we go from here? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, what do you really need? And he said, for you to apologize. And I apologized. I think I did before as well, but he kind of forgot. Anyway, I apologized, but in the back of my mind, the anger came, the one that wanted to be self-righteous and say, but no, you have to fight for your right, for him to finally hear you. So where is his apology? Because in that first story, I asked him to apologize to me. And anyway, it was just very quick conversation, realization of all of that. And in the end, I just told that anger, no, not the right place, and left the hospital. I also said, look, Dad, I also apologize for everything from now on that I might say that might hurt you, but I did without knowing. And he cried, and the next day that anger was still there. I didn't really apologize from my heart, I felt. But when I saw him the next day, it settled. The moment I heard he died, this was our conversation was on Friday. I went to see him on Saturday. On Sunday morning, he died. I just felt as if I was saved from enormous amount of regret, guilt, and at the same time, so much gratitude that he gave me a chance to actually say that. And here it is again. There is a knot in my stomach. There's so much emotion. I feel like I need to process all of that. But this was probably one of the strongest moments when I had that really fast. My body, my inertia to say, it's like, I'm not, it's like, what, me to apologize to you? No way. There was that part. And I don't know what happened in that moment, but I'm so grateful for the practice, because it's not what I felt. I did not feel that anger. The healing process happened. It's so complex. And I feel I can think of so many more stories at the moment, like coming in about all of that. But one I feel like I own right now is the message: be soft, because we don't know. That regret that you mentioned of having the unwholesome speech, it's a strong energy, a strong cross to carry, I believe.
Well, if you are aware enough, but how many people commit heinous crimes and feel justified in having done that? I mean,
Yeah.
you look at what people do during war, but
Yeah.
you know, I think it's beautiful what you did. You know, it's so much easier to react with anger. And I have found that often the anger is the cover for hurt. I know in myself, sometimes I'll look at the anger and I'll realize it's because I feel hurt, or maybe betrayed, or whatever happened between myself and another person. And, you know, with our parents, lots of things happened while we were growing up, right?
Yes.
And all through, and I was angry about a lot of things. And later I realized I had no more blame. I had no more blame to give, because in my heart, I felt so much compassion for my parents. And I realized any blame about things just dropped away, because whatever they did, it was not intentional. You know, whatever they did came out of their own difficulties. And unfortunately, it takes us a bit of aging to realize these things, because, you know, when you have a parent, you're still a child, and you have to get beyond that and see them not as your parent, but as a human being who went through this, that, and the other thing. And they were doing the best they could, even though it wasn't always what you liked, what you preferred, you know. I had challenges with my dad, but I realized also it was because we had this intense closeness that was not spoken, you know, but there was a closeness there. And I was with him as he was dying. I was touching him and humming to him, and even with 50 years of Dharma practice, that was the most spiritual experience. Being with him as I could feel the life energy leaving his body. And that was 25 years ago. I miss him. There are so many things I want to talk with him about. Of questions that I didn't know to ask him decades ago, because at that age, I didn't know to ask those questions.
Yeah.
And he's not here for me to talk with him. And whatever happened, none of it matters anymore, because I really got to feel, to know who he was and what he was trying to do. And as a result of his good intentions, I sometimes experienced negative things. I interpreted as negative. So what are you going to do? This is life. It's not like a sitcom on TV where, oh, happy families. I watched those programs when I was a kid, when television first started, and I always wondered, how come my family isn't like that? It was unreal. It was just unreal. So I'm happy for you to have had this experience, because now for the rest of your life, you can cherish something, just like I'm cherishing, that you couldn't have known would result in this way. But
Yeah, and I'm just becoming aware that so many people told me about losing their parents, and yeah, we say my condolences, but when it's only now that I'm going, oh wow, this is what they mean, because this shared experience, it's beyond explanation and words. It's somehow like, oh, I really see you now. Before I would understand you. I mean, there's nothing to not understand, and understand the relationship and everything, but it's really a felt sense now that your loss is really your loss. It's a certain kind of loss that is going to be known only to you, just like my loss is known only to me. And my sister has her felt sense of loss that only she knows what she's, even if she explains in her words, only each person knows what is that felt sense
but even
the body.
so, my heart goes out to you.
Yes.
Okay, my heart goes out to you, because even though it's not exactly the same, I know, and I think it's a beautiful expression, that my heart goes out to you, because it's a feeling quality. It's, I do understand. I don't just understand in my mind, I understand in my feelings, because I know what that grief is like, and I know the loss. You don't necessarily understand the loss until it's too late.
Yes.
Like I said, I wish my dad were still here, but he died at 96, so I couldn't ask for a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But I think about children who lose their parents when they're children, and how challenging that must be, because you never even got decades. Like I was privileged to get decades. You got decades. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Mirka, we are almost at a time when whatever that is, if time is probably some kind of conspiracy, because I feel our conversation echoes and continues beyond the spoken word. But thank you so much for being with us. Would you like to share how can people connect with you or find out more about your work?
Well, I have two websites. One website is for my writing, and that's mirkaknaster.com. And then I have a website for my artwork, and that's mirkaart2as.com. And either way, and there are contact pages.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's on search engines on
Yeah.
Google as well,
Yeah.
and a beautiful art by the way. So this is where I'm thinking, how much can we touch within 50 minutes? But thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your presence, and looking forward to continue to be in touch. And
I as well.
this is
And Dalida, I am grateful for your honesty, for your willingness to share so intimately. I think you are probably touching many hearts by doing that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mirka. So this is Mindfulness in Action. My name is Dalida Turkovic, and see you next time.